This is Julie Pearson, Little Thunder. Today is October 7th, 2010. I'm here with Robert Taylor, Doris Littrell, and my husband Merlin Little Thunder, and we're at Doris's home. And my first question is to you, Doris. Can you tell us about the time you first met Robert Taylor?
Yes. He came to the gallery with the owner of a gallery whose work he had shown with in Dallas, and that was ending, and so, but they were friends, and so Dr. Bonham and Robert Taylor came into the gallery. And I don't remember, but I'm sure, surely I introduced myself, but Robert started looking at the gallery, looking at the art, but Dr. Bonham just chose a chair over from me, and he just kind of, he was a psychiatrist, so he didn't really want you to know that he was watching, but he was watching. And he was sort of watching me, and then later he said to Robert he thought that might be a good gallery for him to go into. That was the first time I ever saw him. So I really didn't look at his work that day. Then the next time he came in, he brought his work, and I looked at some of the pieces and asked if they'd be for sale. They were more sketches. And he said, well, no, they were more preliminary work. And I said, well, if you tighten those up a bit, I think we could sell them. And he didn't do that, but he started another series for me, and I got to sell it.
Robert, what are your recollections about the first time you met Doris?
Well, that was the first time I walked into the gallery. The first time I met Doris, actually met her, I was same gallery Merlin was in. We were both in Tulsa. Linda Griever's, the art market in Tulsa, and we were having a show. And it seemed like I had been paired a lot, where I was sitting, my work was always next to Gerald Stone. And Gerald kind of became a mentor to me in a lot of ways. We talked a lot and visited, and he'd always told me that there was other galleries to look, that I should be shopping around, because I was always asking him, because I was trying to learn. And then it was on a Saturday. I remember it was a Saturday because it was in the daytime, and it was one of the group shows where there was probably about 20, I don't know, there was probably 20, 25 of us artists there. And we were set up at the very back, and Gerald elbowed me and he said, look, and Doris was walking through the front door, and he goes, that's Doris, and that's who you need to get with. And that's the first time, and I introduced myself to Doris, but I'm sure I don't expect her to ever remember that or anything, but I just remember that it was, the way Gerald always talked about Doris, and I'll embarrass her here, it was almost like, it was a destination to seek. And he said, and it was one of those to see if you'd be accepted by. And so that's became my mission after that. And the Dr. Bonham, me and him were traveling through Oklahoma, came to Oklahoma City for to view a show, and together, and I had brought up that I'd like to go over to this gallery, and he wanted to go with me, and he did indeed. In fact, after we left the gallery, that's what he was talking about, because he knew that me and him were no longer really doing business, but he thought he was very impressed with Doris also.
So that wasn't actually the first time you asked her to handle your work, though? You hadn't asked her yet? No,
what I asked her was, just like you said, is after that visit with Dr. Bonham, I came back a week or so later with work. And because Dr. Bonham had told me to go back in the gallery that day and talk to her, and I said, you don't walk in with nothing. I said, she has no idea what I would be talking about. So.
And I want to say something, if I might, about Dr. Bonham. Linda Griever had told me that he'd be calling on me sometime, and I was open Sunday afternoons at that time. And she advised me to be really careful, because he'll take a lot of your time, but he won't ever handle anything with you. He'll go directly to the artist. So he came on Sunday afternoon, he looked around, and he was with a lady friend, and he said to me, well, there's not anything in here I see I want. And he left. And so I thought, when he came in with Robert, well, I'm not going to get a very good report from that fella, because that had been my first meeting with him.
That's funny. Merlin, do you remember the first time you met Doris, the very first time?
Well, we'd already been dealing with some galleries in Tulsa and Zapalpa and Salmon Springs. I think we've been dealing with Linda Griever at the art market, and Otis Wilson at Indian Territory Gallery, at Western Heritage. and Shirley Wells had an Indian Territory gallery. And Otis would tell me, he said, Clarence Wilson over there in the Galleria, he said, he's interested in your work. And then he said, but you better go to Clarence first because, he said, I don't think you're ready to go to Doris yet. He said, you have to tighten up, you have to get more professional, and you have to really get after it. Same thing with Shirley Wells. She said, if you go down there and get in Doris's gallery, boy, let me tell you, you got your foot in the door. And she said, and you're gonna have to work hard to keep it there. So because she's real professional, she said she's gonna be real short, real professional. And when she says, thank you, dear, she said, get out of there. That's it, you just get out of there. So came in and she wanted to see more than one piece, so we brought her more pieces. And that's when we began dealing with Doris, and we got out of there. Thank you, dear.
Doris, do you remember the first time you met Merlin?
Yes, I remember the first time I met him, but also he's told me a story, and so now I can't remember if I really remembered or if he's just a good memory and tells a good story. So I'm going to say that I asked him, you know, I said, I've heard of you, but hadn't seen your work. And so I need about 3 pieces if I could look at to give me more of an idea. So forthwith, he came out before I said, thank you, dear. And that was like in 1987, as best I recall, which is 23 years. And I think he and Robert came into the gallery at about the same time. Merlin, do you remember it about 23 years ago? That was the year we opened at Red Earth. Mm-hmm. And Robert helped me with that this morning, so.
Now, Robert, I'm wondering if you remember the first time you met Merlin.
I actually think I met Merlin first time actually at Western Heritage. You were in there talking to Otis when I walked in there one day. That's when and I didn't talk to anybody. I just was asked by Otis if he could help me, and I just introduced myself, and he introduced me to you. Because Otis is actually the first gallery I dealt with. But then actually the first time was at Linda Griever's during the shows because of, like I said, Gerald Stone was kind of really quite a mentor for me. At the art market, there was a lot of us. There's a lot of artists in there. There were big group shows. And I was really a new kid on the block. I didn't really know anybody. And Gerald took me around and kind of not introduced me to the artist, introduced me to their work, showing me the work as we'd walk around. And there was the artist I wanted to meet, and Merlin was one of the artists I wanted to meet. He wouldn't have any idea to remember that, but I do. I remember that.
Is that true, Merlin? Do you
No, I remember
meeting
that.
Robert?
I remember that. I remember meeting him the first time at Trail of Tears art show. I won first place in miniature on Medicine Storm, and then he won one of the, I think it was the Jerome Tiger Award on that removal place where Jackson was holding that tree.
That's right. That's right.
That's where I first met him. Actually shook hands and introduced myself, and we visited a little bit.
I've forgotten about we were visiting there, but no, I'd met you before that. I wasn't introduced as any kind of an artist or anything at that time. But at the art market, I met you simply because I wanted Gerald to introduce me.
Doris, when you took on Robert, you were already carrying some of the newer, more experimental styles of painting. Do you remember any of the early reactions to Robert's work? Or did you?
I remember being surprised because I was known for, because I'd been in the business so long as a wholesaler and then in the gallery a long time, and therefore I knew Stephen Mopope and some of the earlier painters and dealt with their work. And so I was known as a gallery that enjoyed very traditional painting. And I, to this day, don't remember why I responded to Robert's work, but I did, and obviously part of my response would have been I thought we could market and build that. And it did happen that way, but it still surprises me. Even Merlin with his landscapes, it was altogether different than a two-dimensional painting, you know, and I felt similarly to him. I just felt they were good. And then my hunch, my feeling, has marketed through all these years. I'd like to tell about one story, if I may, about marketing with Merlin. Well, I started helping this man, his name was Dr. Richard Mansfield, build a gallery of art. And how I met Dr. Mansfield was I was in a strip shopping center, and the last shopping center had Robert Redbird in it, and he and Joquita had opened, and they didn't have any money to advertise, and so I was advertising in this little publication that went into the hotels and motels, and I said to them, would you like me to list that you're opening there on Sunday afternoon? And they said yes. So it was actually Redbird's name that brought Dr. Mansfield around because he wanted to see. So then I was just next door, so he came in and visited with me and brought some alabasters. And that began a relationship with him. And his wife didn't really enjoy Native American work. She liked English watercolors. So he would, as we got to know each other really well, I'd be having a one-man show for Merlin, and he would call and he'd say, I'm calling to wish you a good show, now put Merlin on. And so then he'd say to Merlin, sure hope you have a good show, now put Doris on. And then he'd say to me, I'm ready to buy a pony today, does he have anything with horses? And then I need some more of the really humorous pieces. So the ones that you find are the most humorous, pick those out and put them aside, I'll buy those. So he went on like this, sight unseen, trusting Merlin and me. And after all these years, actually, he bought other people as well, but he said, I'm going to donate my collection. He graduated medical school at Oklahoma University, and I'm going to donate it to OU. And in the meantime, I was a friend of David and Molly Boren, and they had gone from U.S. Senate to the presidency down there, and they were buying for OU, and I met him, and I said, I'd like you to meet Dr. Mansfield, and they met. And then Mansfield said, I want Smithsonian to take half of the collection. So they picked OU and Smithsonian, which put the artist that I had been working with and thought so much of in Oklahoma in the Smithsonian, which was a great thing Dr. Mansfield did. But when they came, I had told him about a woman who was doing appraisals because he wanted his work that was stored in my closet in the gallery appraised, and there were 83 Merlin Little Thunders. That he bought more than that, but that's how many had been stashed in the last couple or so years or whatever. I always remember that number, 83. And so they got shipped down to OU.
It's a neat story. I think really some of the highlight moments for any gallery are the shows. And Robert, I'm wondering if you remember the first show that you and Merlin were both at Doris's. And if not the first one, just perhaps what some of those shows were like.
Well, my memory's a lot of water under the bridge. I don't really remember maybe the very first show. I think that, well, I guess to just take the time to just say that I think that what had been impressed upon me why to find Doris was just concreted once I did shows with Doris. And it was the way that each artist, we were each given our space and room to display not only the work, but to also actually get the intimacy with the collectors that was missing in a lot of other places that I've been starting out. And the being juxtaposed against different artists. I'm like Doris. When you look at it, you'd sit there and go, well, this on the face, you'd think this may not all congeal to be such a firm and solid show, but I think that all of our works complemented each other. We were all, and I think that the reason that happened was that, and I've told Doris this over the years, is that true gallery owners are just like artists. They are an artist, and they're painting as the artist that they groom and collect and mentor in their own ways, and the way it's presented to the public. And I think that it really enhanced all of us, and I think that we all realized that we were all becoming more and more professional from that.
You know, just to pursue that idea about an intimacy was sort of available to you there with the collectors. Collectors came to other shows. How was it different at Doris's? You know, they came to other gallery shows, and you had the opportunity to talk with them, but was there some way in which it felt a little different, or?
Well, I'll just say this, and I'd like Merlin to say his feelings about it. In that, after Doris's, I picked up a gallery, and I was in Santa Fe, and I've been dealing out in Santa Fe, and one thing I'd always tell people after being out there, which was considered the art mecca, was that I've never met as a knowledgeable a crowd as that you meet in Doris's gallery. I said, and I think that's why I was always excited to go there. I was always, first off, I was always honored to be with peers and contemporaries that I respected, Merlin and others, that the clientele was not, I won't say just a family feeling, but it was a very knowledgeable crowd. And you didn't feel that you needed to you could actually go in depth of talking about your work, and it was readily accepted. Whereas in most galleries or in other places, they just want to touch the highlights and they're ready to go on. And so that is the one thing I noticed.
Good explanation. Merlin, how about your memories of some of those shows or comments on what Robert said?
Well, I think the most memorable show was probably 1990 during Red Earth. We had a show at Red Earth, during Red Earth, and everything was really upbeat, and it was we were all moving around real quickly, and there's a lot of activity going on. It's a lot of excitement. It's like the air was full of electricity, and people were coming in from Red Earth. People were flying in. They were coming in to see our show. I think Manuel from Canada came in to view the show. And a lot of people came in to view the show, and I think the most extraordinary thing about being there was that you could actually be yourself in front of these patrons. You didn't have to feel like you had to put on any airs or be stilted or nothing. You could just be yourself. You know, even although it had a lot of butterflies and it was really stressful. You know, you could still be yourself and talk about your work and enjoy being with everybody at the gallery.
I'd also like to just say the other thing about that is it was a family. You didn't have the petty jealousy that you do encounter in some galleries, not with the gallery owner, but the other artists. And everybody was as willing to talk about somebody else as they were their own work, and everybody was as happy as anybody when anybody made a sale. And that was, like I said, it was just a good feeling.
Doris, when did you first have the idea of doing a Red Earth show? I believe Red Earth, as we knew it, sort of started in 1992, but I don't remember if you had...
1987
1987.
it began, and I ran the print tent down there for 87 and 88. And then the artists would put their prints in that area, and I would sell them, and then they were paid at the end of the show, you know. And they decided they wanted those in their booth to handle it themselves. And I stopped then. There wasn't anything I could see that I could do to assist its growth. And so I went back to the gallery, and I started thinking probably in 89, so 90 may have been, I don't know if it was 89 or 90, the first show I had during Red Earth. I know in Santa Fe and other metropolitan areas that are known for painting and great numbers of shows in the Santa Fe market and so forth, everyone has something during that time, and that's just accepted. But here there weren't very many galleries, and I wasn't really sure. I didn't want to interfere with their marketing down there and have that controversy. So say Merlin had a booth, and then I I had a show. From all that time until I retired, that was the way Merlin and I worked. I would have his booth number up on the wall by his work. They could look him up there. They could view what he had, view what he had given in the gallery, and he would spend his time in the booth with allowing some time then to come to the gallery as well. So it worked out just fine as long as you were considerate of one another. And the customers seemed to like that. It gave them a freedom to discuss with me what they bought from Merlin down there. That's always a good way to work at things, I think.
And Merlin, that was kind of a balancing act for you, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's a balancing act, yeah.
Do you want to talk about that a little bit? just what you used to strive for in terms of.
Well, you have to always strive for consistency. You have to do some really high quality art for your booth, and you have to I had to do some really high quality work for Doris's, so we had to split them in half and put half of them in the booth and put half of them in the gallery. And the prices had to stay the same. I never lowered the prices or raised them in the booth, and we never did the same at the gallery. They had to stay the same. They had to reflect one another.
And that's why people weren't always trying to get him to come down, because they learn that right away. If you're going to take the commission off from the gallery and then sell it to them, and all of my artists were ethical. They therefore built a good career for themselves because they saw what was important and acted on it.
Robert, what kinds of special pressures did you feel for Red shows, or did you? But
No, I'm like Merlin. A show's a show. Now I didn't have to do that balancing, so that actually made it a lot easier for me. It was just, and Doris's shows have never been. Once I felt comfortable, and I thought Merlin put it real well. But once you felt really, you could just let your hair down and be yourself.
And I want to say that the customers enjoyed that. They knew the painters were having fun. And so a man who has come, I've known since 1968, he never bought a thing from me or anywhere I was in a gallery where he was visiting an opening. He bought in maybe distressed situations or so forth, but he built a collection that way. But he said to me, but he always went to all the shows because he said, I wanted to visit with the artists about their work and what they were doing. And they enjoyed having me do that, even though I was not a buyer. I thought that was interesting. From 1968 to 2010, I was hearing that. So it had to have been lots of kinds of ways to enjoy. I wanted to say to some of my friends sometime, it doesn't matter that you're not buying this year. We enjoy your energy. Just come bring that.
Mm-hmm. And I just like to throw out there also, I also think because of that atmosphere, our shows, we had good turnouts because of, since we were so comfortable, Merlin would sit and give a talk about his work going around the wall. I would do the same thing. Other artists were doing the same thing. I always thought we were doing a lot, not only just for our own careers and such, but for the industry itself, because there's a lot of education took place under Doris's roof.
Right.
For not only for the patrons, but also for the artist.
Right. It was, I remember too, I was thinking, gosh, what a lot of work for you, Doris, because there was a tremendous, at some of the shows, number of artists, tremendous amount of work. Then your weavings and the pots and all those things. How did you decide how to display everything for a special show?
Well, I didn't know very much when I first opened. I had been a wholesaler, and that means that I took Oklahoma Indian art into other states to museums and galleries and either put on shows or wholesaled their work if that's what they wanted to do. And they got that exposure. But back in Oklahoma, I had decided I wanted, and so I was accustomed to being around galleries through my work. And as much as you can learn from just observing someone, I knew a bit, but not anything like what I knew once I opened my own. So when I opened the first show, I had 40 painters. That was too many, even though I had a large space. It was too many. And they were too crowded. And so I cut down on the number of painters right away that I had, until when I retired I had, not to say that I wouldn't work with a Stroud or someone whose work was requested, but that we generated our income together on a regular basis was Merlin and Robert and me. That was the way it was for a number of years before I retired. But I also started with Bob McCabe, and we bought a Santa Clara pot, and then we bought Navajo rugs. And then after, his mother lived in San Diego, and we'd go there every summer. And after a couple of years, I said, you know, I came from Apache, and there's a lot of painters down there, and they've always been, Caddo County's always been known for painters. And let's go down there and see what's there. And so my Uncle Everett, my mother's brother, had been, by the time he retired, 40 years running the scout camp down there. So he was quite like, he was a cowboy, and he loved Indians. He was close to Hauser Allen and close to Spencer Asa. And George Gianti lived half a mile. So George was a painter, and he came up to Everett's and would sell him his art. And Everett would put them on his wall with a push pin, and I would go and look. And he'd mark them up 50 cents and sell them to me. And so that's how I started buying Caddo County Indian paintings. And then after a while, the Indian people artists would hear, you know, because not a lot of people bought in those days. And so then our name was dropped that we were buying. And so then some of the artists would come to the house. And that's how it started. I worked for the telephone company, and then for General Motors I worked in corporate endeavor. And then on my lunch hour I'd sell Indian art. And on the weekends I'd run an ad and stuff like that. And there was a collector here. His name was Mr. Silverman, and Shifra, his wife. And they were serious. I'd met them in 1968, and they were seriously collecting. And I had a friend who lived some distance from me in Bethany, and she was having a garage sale. So, of course, I gave her some Indian art. And he went over, and he called, and he said, "Mrs. McCabe, are you everywhere?" He was thoroughly discouraged.
And you helped them build their collection, and I was sort of wondering about how you would define what it means to build a collection for someone, or to help them build one. How did you used to approach that?
I think a lot of it was like a lot of things I did. I really didn't even think about it or know what I was doing. I just was, and I wasn't taught or anything. I felt the way I would feel about it. And of course I just felt it was God-given, that I had a talent for picking fine painters. And so then that's why I loved my work, because the same way I was close to them, then I had this other wonderful experience with the people that bought it. So I had it coming and going, great work. And then they would say to me, well, or maybe not even ask, they'd just watch. And if they were a Merlin customer, pretty soon they probably were going to be a Robert customer. And it was vice versa. Though some stayed with only one painter, mostly they bought even things that were quite diverse, like Doc Tate's traditional work, maybe a dancer on black, and then I'd just point them in the way that what I thought was very good. If I got I had a Mary Creeping Bear customer, and I got in one that I thought was just exceptionally good, then I'd call them and say, come and look. And they'd usually buy. I hope that answered you, Julie.
Yes,
I just want to say, I think it was best put, and as a collector, I worked for Doris for a couple of years in the gallery.
I did want to talk about that.
I'll put Merlin on the spot on this one because it was a collector of his looking at it. And I think what it was that what I'd always said about Doris was that she had a natural artistic point, a way she approached picking her artist. And I used to joke, you could tell her artist by going in their house, because you'll find we've all traded for Doris. She has actually equipped us with our own furnishings.
That's right.
But this collector is looking at Merlin's, And they said that this was when they were really. I just said, well, this is one of the newer pieces that had come in, and you would really like. And they said, we like everything Merlin does that we've seen because he has a passion with storytelling. And I thought that was an apt description of Merlin, because I always said people will always will react to somebody who shows passion in what they do. And then if there's actually something they're saying with that passion, it really carries a lot of weight. And I think that Doris knows that.
And over and over they would say to me, and we heard him that day at an opening, he told the stories around the room. Like they would say about Doc Tate, and he played the flute that day. That's what they say about you.
Well, I remember at some of those shows, Merlin, you would come in with some paintings that were in progress. And sometimes those would sell as well. Can you talk a little bit about people seemed intrigued by that.
Well, I kind of went against my grain on bringing in progress work. Of course, my wife made me. Because, you know, I had a good friend who was becoming better friends with me before he passed away. His name was Joan Plummer. I got to befriend him. I got to be friends with him.
Can you
And
explain who he
advised me.
is real quickly?
John Plummer was a historical painter. He done paintings of the history of the West. He was not an Indian. He was an Anglo painter. I think he was from the East Coast. But I admired his work because he was real truthful in his art. He did his best to research and get all of the implements right on different tribes. So that's why I watched him and admired him. And I talked to him quite a bit about his technique and the way he paints, and he used to advise me. He told me I had good color, and I told him, well, I use primaries only. He said, good, that's good, that's good. Anyway, he told me, he said, I don't ever take anything out of the studio unless I'm 100% satisfied with it. So that kind of stuck with me. I didn't like to take anything out of the studio until I was 100% satisfied with it. But you know, as we began selling more in Doris's gallery, and we started moving pieces quickly, then you know it was a necessity that we had to bring things out and show in progress. And people began to look, and they say, they found it real interesting to see the various stages of a painting. And then they would say, what are you going to put in it? What else are you going to put in? And I explained it to them. And a lot of times the painting didn't come back that way. It came back different. And they said, oh, well, I thought we thought you were going to do this. And I said, well, it didn't work out. Because a lot of times those pieces were only in the problem-solving stages. And after working on them, then they began to develop. And they went on their own. They developed on their own. They went in their own direction, however they were supposed to go. So that's usually the way I told them. I said, well, it didn't go that way. There was a lot of problems with this, and I went ahead and changed it. It went the direction it was supposed to. So that's the way that we used to bring.
That's interesting in itself. The last show we had together, it was in 1990. There was one in progress. And one of his regular customers, his wife was out of town and he hated to buy it without having her there too. But he just couldn't resist it, so he bought it unfinished. And he told you that actually, to me, it is finished. You could sign it right now. But Merlin said, no, there was going to be something else. And of course, he loved that too. But it could have been.
Will it cost extra? And I said, no.
I think so, maybe. I'm not real sure. It would have been a good thing to cover. But he's still our patron, so I guess whatever was said was a good thing. But I was wondering when he told me what he was going to put in it, if that would be the thing or if the animals might change, but they didn't. He added an extra buffalo or whatever.
Well, Doris, I'm not sure of the years, but you invited Robert sort of to come work at the gallery for, what was it, a year or
Well, I
two?
had some health problems, and so it's going to be unknown actually, but hopefully it wasn't going to be too long. But he was good enough to say he would do that. If I might say something that I've never said to him at this point, I knew his God-given intellect, he could do anything that I needed him to do. But what I didn't think about was his ethics. And we lost all kinds of money because I was making all kinds of money with his art, and he wouldn't show his art. He was afraid the other artist would hold it against him. So there they hung. He never told a
Interesting.
story for 2 years, I don't think. So as soon as I think it hastened me to recovery, I got back in there and we started selling tailors again.
I thought she was going to tell. We heard through the grapevine that there was a bet that whether if I would last 2 months before I either quit or Doris fired me or Doris killed me, one of the two.
Well, I remember you actually had a place right across the street, and I know we're kind of planning on dividing your time between painting and helping with the gallery. Did your commission from the State Arts Council, did that come while you were working for Doris, or was that
It actually came after, but what that did teach me, which I would advise young artists now, I thought I'd hung out in the gallery enough to have an idea. I said, but actually working a gallery gave me a whole different perspective on the business side of art and exactly how much work is involved in that side. And so it was quite an eye-opener for me. but Doris, which to her credit, she just said that she said I wasn't doing things the way she thought I should, was that she basically just sat down, and I guess I could say in a way you did fire me, and that you said, for your career you actually need to get back to painting. And we came to a mutual agreement on that.
Yeah, well, it was true. You'd given enough way to, you needed to. A painter needs to paint, you're very so. So I thought I was lucky that you kept that open, kept the gallery open so I could come back. And one of the artists said the other day, well, you've retired 5 times. I really lost track. I was glad he was making note.
Well, I did want to talk a little bit about how being so close to the gallery was helpful with the commission, and I know you've talked a little bit about the Oklahoma Arts Council Public Works Commission that you had, but as I understand it, Karen Sharp was really instrumental in helping secure that.
I'm the proudest thing I am of that is that me and Miss I just went blank on the sculptor. No, I just went blank on the sculptor. Shirley Thompson Smith was what we both claim to be proud of. Our commission was the first actually jury commission of all of it. We were juried into it. But Karen Sharp of the Arts Council, who worked under Betty Price, was it was her. She was the liaison for for the centennial stuff, and she was very instrumental. She was the one that demanded that they use some kind of a commission, and I have to give Drew Edmondson, our state attorney general, the actual credit, because he walked into the meeting, because I was told about this. He walked into the meeting and told them they would know there would be 2 committees, one to jury what artists to be considered, and then a different jury to pick the paintings. And he demanded that since it was going to be done for his offices. And so that's, and being actually located straight across the street, living at the time, Doris was very kind. I actually didn't have room in the studio to do the canvases the size that they wanted.
Remind us of the size again.
Well, they're 8 foot by 4 foot, and there's 3 of them. And so, and I said, well, I can only work at one at a time, and I'm going to be a contortionist. And by the time it's over with, and Doris just basically demanded that I go ahead and use the extra gallery space. And so I would set up over there, and she allowed me to use it as long as I wanted to on that commission.
So that was my next question. Were you ever painting when Doris was open for business, and were you kind of aware of each other's presence, or was it? Or did people try to come in and see how it was progressing?
No, Doris kept me protected away from that. Yeah, I would work at whatever hours I wanted. But Doris kept me protected from all that. It was partitioned off from the rest of the gallery. And so I had complete freedom of that because.
And I never went in either. I rarely ever. I went in one time and he was standing. He'd gone up a ladder and was standing on the second table. And I thought, my God, he's going to kill himself. And I never went in again.
I had quite a jury-rigged easel for these canvases.
That was a real feat and wonderful canvases. Doris, I always got the impression, I mean, it was you enjoyed it when somebody bought something, but it wasn't just about the fact that you made a bit of money for the gallery. There was much more to it than that, and I wondered if you could talk about that.
Well, when you asked earlier, and I really wasn't quite sure how I could answer building collections, I think the patron always knew that. And I was excited to see a finished collection. And part of that, we all had a living. Sometimes it was more than others or less. Robert and I used to say we just tighten our belt and keep painting or keep working because there's always work to do. And in 83, later, like in 84, I heard there'd been a recession in galleries. I didn't even know it. We were so busy working. So I think if you're not afraid all the time, then you're free from money worries. If you just don't let just on faith, just work and have fun.
Right.
And then the money comes. But I always was aware that where it was going and what they had already, who they were already buying. I was aware of collections. That answer?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Merlin, I know that besides just representing your work, handling your work, Doris also advised you about pricing. I wondered if you could talk about that a bit.
Well, pricing's always been a real tender subject, you know, because we always watched artists when they price their work, and a lot of times they always price it too high. They always seem to price it too high, and then what we kind of learned is we kind of learned to kind of go by the fair market value, and then you know, we always kind of charge for the frames and mats and stuff, and that kind of brought the painting up to where you want it, where we could all live with the price. And the most important thing is that the pricing to me is that I didn't want the painting to hang around in the gallery and gather dust. I'd rather see some people living with it. People, you know, I'd rather see the painting in people's homes during Thanksgiving and during Christmas and during birthdays, in their living rooms, and their, you know, just living with it. You know, that to me was more important than money. So, you know, we always were very gentle in pricing. You know, we kept our prices there. We wrote our prices to the level to where we couldn't keep them on the wall no more. So we had to rise them just a little bit. Each time we rose them a little bit more and a little bit more. And we didn't want to just shoot them way up there just like that, because, you know,
But that is a reason.
people wouldn't be able to enjoy them, you know. We wanted them to enjoy them, to be able to live with these paintings. And that's, to me, that's what pricing is all about.
Well, yeah, and I remember on the flip side, Doris specifically, when you sat down with us and said it's time to raise your prices a bit. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do. There were just a few things that aided us in that. Was if you can't keep the work, if you don't have any inventory ever, then it's because the marketing is so active, then it's time to go up and awards. If you're entering competition shows, awards help, though they're not as important as some of the other aspects. But the fact that you're interested in competition shows and then interested in when to slow down on that and encourage younger people, you know, to come in and get that exposure, but it's exposure. And Merlin has always gone to shows like Red Earth, and that exposure is very good. And with Robert, who didn't make shows, but then he had a Santa Fe gallery, so that gave an added exposure to another part of the nation. So those kinds of things might be one thing for one and something else, but they're the same thing in the end. the exposure. And of course, keeping your prices where they can go home and other people can see them. And there's nothing greater than that, having your home open to people and they get acquainted with your work through having friends or family own it.
Robert, did Doris ever help you with pricing?
Oh, I was just gonna say, I want to interject on this too, is that, well, the one thing with, I agree with Merlin, that pricing is probably the hardest thing an artist has to deal with. And I think that that's one of the reasons that I was told to find Doris, one of the reasons that it's just been such a good fit, is that the ego is left at the door when you walked into that gallery, and especially among the artists. That's back to where we're all family. And like Merlin said, we didn't need our ego fed by having this big high price tag on a painting hanging on a wall that everybody may ooh and ah over, but nobody's going to buy. But also the other flip side of that was that with the galleries I had experienced and was doing my research into, was that Doris also was for our industry, in the Indian art industry, was demanding a living wage for her artists. And that was a major step in this industry. And a lot of people don't know that a lot of the earlier collections were built on distress situations, and Doris refused to allow that to happen with us. And so that I just once again would say thank
And I
you,
wanted to
Doris.
say that sometimes they would say, not serious collectors, but people in the gallery would say to me, buyers or prospective buyers, that, oh yeah, we bought this at a garage sale, we got it for $10. That was okay to tell me that, but don't keep on telling me, because when are you going to help a painter? It's okay to occasionally find something, but what's wrong with letting a gallery have a commission, which we earn by our work, which they never will acknowledge. So they want to cut that out first of all, and then even go down, take them outside the gallery, show it out of their car, sell it out there. Once that would happen with me, then they were never in the gallery again, because it isn't fair to the ones that are acting ethically. Why should, it's like me taking $1 that I could invest in Merlin and giving it to someone who is not ever going to go anywhere, really, because they don't trust that they can go in the right direction and develop a wholesome, where you can feel that you can be a painter the rest of your life because you've laid the groundwork.
Well, and back to that about me, I would ask Susan, the mother of my daughter, Susan Leggett, she would say, she was my most confidant and critic, and I'd say price-wise, and she'd always defer, what did Doris say? And so I would when I'd show it to Doris, Doris would say, she never presumed, she'd always say, and what are you asking for it? And then I would always try to give a ballpark and say, well, I was thinking in this range. And I would be trying to read Doris the whole time, whether she thought, if she's rolling her eyes or what. And then once she agreed to this price range, that's the price it was going to be set at.
Well, that sounds like our discussions, doesn't it, Merlin?
Yeah,
I had this feeling come out from him. I've lived that.
yeah. If you look at it too long, that means it's too high.
That's true.
If you look at the painting too long, well, what do you think?
I want to tell you something.
And she reaches for the checkbook, you're too low.
And I'm grabbing it too fast. Oh, that is funny, Robert. Well, most of my regular patrons, I have told that I'm closing the gallery, but I'm going to be a broker for Merlin and Robert and any of the, maybe a fine Navajo rug or something. It's not going to be a vast amount. I have a small home, and I'm not going to necessarily have shows, but when I get Merlin in, I'll call some patrons in and we'll have a little time together with that piece. But it's already gotten out that I'm going to do that. So yesterday I get a packet from one of the painters that he wants of photos. And he would like me to handle these. Well, some of them I've seen before, a long time before, because he's too expensive. And when I told him his pricing price structure was off there a bit, he said, I have to have this money. And that was his answer. So here's the envelope, they're still in there, and he's really an able painter. And I know he would like to sell, but he will not listen to that. You know, that's my experience. I know what his things would sell at because he's a good painter.
Right.
But not, he's...
Wouldn't be guided.
Well, and he just really, he's not at all guided by the fact if they're never selling, there's something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Because he must know that he's capable. He's capable, and he enjoys. But I would feel badly if nothing ever turned. I'm not saying nothing, but for the most part. And they'll look at someone who has been marketing for years and years and see what they're bringing as maybe their major piece. Like one of my dear painters from Caddo County said when Robert got the $100,000 commission. Well, doesn't he know that don't they know that I'm a painter? I could give him a $100,000 commission piece. You know, that's Mr. Redbird. And so, you know, and he was dead serious. He said, I told a friend of mine in Phoenix, I'll probably be getting one soon because I'm as good as he is. And some of the things he knows, I taught him.
And that was kind of a positive stressor, wasn't it, in a way, to get that?
Oh, yes.
To get such a big commission. It's positive, but it's...
It was positive for one thing. It introduced me to people who had never looked at my work. Secondly, it challenged me because what they wanted was not my usual work, and so. But as far as for career-wise, it was a big boost. It really was. It was one of the highlights of my career. So.
And Doris, you went to, well, the opening was a little tricky because I guess it wasn't, the space was not quite ready the first time. But did you get to go to
No.
see the...
I didn't get to go to that.
The health, you couldn't make it for that. But the best part of that was at the opening. And she's not here, but Shirley Thompson Smith, who was the sculptor, they didn't tell either of us before they had the unveiling that we were going to have to talk, and they did that purposefully. They said because they didn't want us to be nervous. They told us that morning that we had to do a talk. And Shirley ran off and disappeared, and I didn't know where she went, and I was talking to some people. She comes back, and then this assistant came and got us and took us back to where we were going to have to walk up on the stage, and she said, now, here's, when we introduce you, each of you will have your chance to talk, and Shirley, you're going first. And Shirley pulls out these pages she'd been writing. She goes, well, did you write something down? And I pulled out this little napkin that I said, and I had like 6 names. And I said, yeah, I got to remember to thank all these people right here. And she goes, that's all you wrote? And I said, well, they said that you were going to give the whole story. And I saw the lady coming down to grab Shirley. And she goes, what? About that time the woman's grabbed her on stage. She came off the stage, and I can't say what Shirley said to me when she came off. But that was fun. But other than that, I don't remember because I don't like speaking for. Nobody's public speakers usually, and that's one of my. I'm not real big. I don't even remember what I said that day. So. But I remember the look on Shirley's face when I said, "You're supposed to speak for us."
That's funny.
Doris?
I was at the time I was in a walker, and I thought it was a small space and it was going to be crowded, and it wasn't appropriate, I didn't think.
Right.
So I've always been sorry I missed that. Go ahead.
But you did often, I remember, go, and sometimes after the crowds, to various shows that Merlin or Robert were exhibiting in.
Yes.
I remember you going to Cowboy Hall. And you arranged the show at the Capitol for Merlin, didn't you? Or were you sort of helped see that it came off?
And but Karen was involved,
Karen?
and I was involved with it, and they said, no, we don't serve refreshments. I said, well, I want to serve a little something. Merlin will kill me if I go up there. There's not even a sandwich or a drink. And so they said, well, keep it down because we're going to be up there and it's going to be awkward and getting it up there and so forth. The first thing I saw Merlin do was look at that sick table. You know. I couldn't believe they had all those shows there and never had refreshments.
Right.
One time I went to one and it was right after Robert had one there, and Betty Price said, you know, times are hard, and the Taiwan show was over here, so it was great crowds to both of these. So, you know, our friends have baked some cookies. So they had coffee and some of friends baked cookies. Times were hard.
Well, you have to interject that at Doris's openings, food was just as much of unveiling as the artwork was. It was like all Indian events. Well, we did start on time, but there was always more food than anybody could eat.
And I always had people that helped me do that. You know, well, at one time we had Tilly, and Tilly would do it all, but she got more and more expensive. And when I heard that Tilly had said to one of my artists, "Will you give me this? She doesn't pay me enough." And I thought, okay, Tilly, that's your head right there. We never had Tilly again. And we were just as well off. So, but she was over there asking for donations because I wasn't fair.
Well, that was pretty remarkable too. I thought that, you know, collectors, you know, who were also friends would chip in and help. I mean, they'd help with
wasn't that
hanging paintings. They'd help with the food.
And do dishes.
Do dishes, yeah.
I say to one of my friends, you are not doing those dishes. She has such a tedious job and works so hard. And she almost cried. She told her husband, I'm sorry, she won't let me do dishes. I thought, never again. She can do those dishes as long as I am here.
But for those openings, Merlin and I did educate people how to make coffee.
Amen. Amen.
Yes.
To this day, don't they were a sign?
You drop a penny in the coffee cup and you can't see Lincoln. Now the text or pale.
It's ready.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
thank you.
I'm winding up here, but I wanted to ask, starting with you, maybe Robert, what Doris's work in Oklahoma Indian Art Gallery has meant first to your career, if you can answer that one.
I owe a lot to this lady. I was really, like most of us, I think a lot of us are so self-taught, and that the art business is a strange business, and it's not, you can't really treat it, you're not only dealing with your product, as everybody likes to say, but you're also dealing with emotions. And with that, the artist, we tend to kind of get in our own world, and to be successful at this, you have to come out of that world to actually to the business world to be able to sell. And Doris is helped you take baby steps to do it. She would tell you what to do, and then you'd hear, "That's it, sweetie." "Thank you, sweetie," or what, and you knew that was what you were going in the right direction. But what I've always told Doris, and I think about every third or fourth visit I'm with Doris, I'll bring this up about, I've always viewed Doris as being just a fellow artist. And her sensibilities are exactly the same as all of ours, and the fact of the way she approached things. But part of her palette was her artist, and she took very good care of us. And it's something that a lot of people, and I've told this story for many years, and I learned a lot more of it by working. I learned what not to say to Doris, also what I'm working for, but also was that I said I like to tell people that, you know, ever since I've been affiliated with that gallery, I said, Doris always wanted to know where else we showed, what else we were doing, where we made sales, and she always promoted that to our collectors and other people. Whereas that's an oddity in the art world and other galleries. It's always territorial. Not only that, is come fall, about this time of year, Doris would start the phone calls out when she was talking to the artists or when you'd show up wanting to know how things, because this is the slower time of the year, the shows are winding down, how things were going. And I'm telling out of school on this, I learned a little bit about from working there, but remarkably, every November, during the month of November, she'd gauge who'd had sales and who hadn't. Remarkably, if you hadn't had a good going into Christmas season, remarkably things always sold at the Oklahoma Indian Art Gallery. Mm-hmm. You were always getting a check. There wasn't an artist that did not have something for Christmas come that time. And all of us may have been, we may have just walked around thinking, boy, I'm sure glad he made that sale. Well, I learned after working with her, a lot of those sales were put in those closets because Doris was buying them, and she would sell them at a later date. But she was making sure, and she never wanted to embarrass any of us. Some of us didn't know she was the one buying the work, and she was. So
Thank you for that story, Robert. Merlin, what has Doris done for your career?
Well, I grew up in Doris's gallery, both artistically and physically, emotionally, spiritually. We just grew up in there, and I think it was always that, we always had to have a standard of excellence. We always had to do our very, very best. And her gallery was the hallmark of Indian art. You just had to do your best. And some of these galleries that we used to deal with used to try to steal work from her. They used to say, one of our patrons saw a painting at Doris's gallery. Can you bring it over here? And we'd say, no. We can do you one similar.